The price of tariffs making its mark on Wall Street.
Again, there'll be a transition cost and transition problems, but in the end, it's going to be a beautiful thing.
As the world and Wall Street watch the markets, what does this mean for the state's economy? Property tax relief, public schools, border security. There's a plan on how the state uses its money for the next 2 years, where it's going, and the debates that played out at the Capitol.
It's wrong. It's dead wrong. If you're gonna cut stuff, look at who you're cutting.
She survived cancer, and now she's hoping she can get by. She's already been impacted by cuts that helped her buy food. We take a look at the direct hit to families and food banks.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. It's been a volatile week in the stock market after President Donald Trump announced his plan to impose widespread tariffs on imported goods. Investors appear pessimistic that despite the president lowering many of his new tariffs, there's still no end in sight to the trade war with China. The president also keeping new baseline 10% tariffs in place along with previous tariff rounds, including on Mexico and Canada. But how does the current plan affect Texas? Joining us for some insight is the Texas Comptroller Glen Hegar. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Good to be with you.
So we've been watching the impacts of the tariffs on a national scale, but what does it mean for the state? Have you been keeping track of any of those trade disruptions?
Yeah, we constantly track all things that impact the state of Texas, all across all 12 economic regions, whether that's trade, any other issues, both nationally and globally. Obviously, Texas is a significant trading partner with the rest of the world. Texas exports roughly over 20% of all the gross value of exports out of the entire United States comes out of the state of Texas. So we're very tied to the international market.
Let's hone in on oil. We know that prices fell below $60, the lowest in years. What's the latest forecast, and do you have a message for those industries?
Yeah, so first and foremost, the fact that they have lowered, that obviously oil and gas is one of the more volatile commodities that's out there. So if they decrease or increase by a significant amount, that doesn't mean we automatically revise our revenue estimate. We watch it over several times. What is that longer term trend? And so therefore, right now, those are lower prices. But the point is, we're not changing the revenue estimate as today. We're being cautious. We're watching, continue to caution the legislature as always to be conservative in their budgeting numbers, because we're given a revenue estimate that is a very long window out for over 2 years. And so therefore a lot can happen in the international economy in that 2 years.
Yeah, what do you think is the biggest threat to the Texas economy right now?
Yeah, I think there are several different big threats. And again, we don't just look at the Texas economy, the national economy, but the global economy. And so therefore, obviously trade is one of those issues. Wars, events in other nations, say, for example, with lower oil prices, not just questions of tariffs and questions of trade, but also, for example, here not too long ago, the Saudis increased their oil production. And so therefore, that's going to cause oil prices to decrease. So all of these different things we continue to monitor, watch, and make sure we stay very in tune with the legislature, especially during a legislative session, and make sure the public is aware of the trajectory of the state economy.
Well, we've always appreciated having you on the show. Thank you for the past, and maybe we'll get to talk to you a couple more times before your tenure's over.
Sounds great. Good to be with you today.
Thank you very much. After hours of debate and amendments, lawmakers passed the blueprint on how the state spends its money in the next 2 years. It includes $51 billion for property tax relief, more than $70 billion for public schools, and $6.5 billion for border security. Dylan McKim was at the Capitol until late hours, I understand, when it finally passed. Thank you for being here. You tired?
Just a little bit, It was a little bit after 3 a.m. when they finished this, so it's been a long time.
Well, a big headline that we know from that night was when lawmakers zeroed out the budget for the Lottery Commission and the Texas Film Incentive. But it appears lawmakers were not aware that they did that until after they voted. What happened there?
Yeah, this was really a surprise. And a little backstory for you. The lawmakers were handed their amendment package, which was 469 pages long. That's how many amendments they were going through. And the very first amendment that they even discussed was from an El Paso Democrat Mary Gonzalez, and originally her amendment was something very mundane. It was like taking $100,000 from the Arts Commission and putting it somewhere else. And then she came up and said, actually, I have an amendment to my amendment. It's just some technical things. We're going to clean it up. No big deal. People voted through the amendment, and then they voted on the amended amendment. And then about 10 minutes later, they realized, oh my gosh, did you see what the amendment was? And it actually zeroed out the lottery, it zeroed out charitable bingo, and it also zeroed out the Texas film incentive program that Governor Abbott's been boasting about, that we've seen Matthew McConaughey being an advocate for. So this was a huge surprise, and our team was able to speak with the House spokesperson with the House Democrats, who told us this was intentional. The whole reason to do that was because there was a slew of amendments by House Republicans to really pick apart the film incentive program and the Lottery Commission, their budget, and divert those funds to other agencies or maybe different projects in their district. And when they did this, they zeroed it out. Those amendments could not happen anymore because there's no more money in the Lottery Commission. There's no more money in the charitable bingo. So it was a big shock. Will that stay like that? I mean, this is not the official budget yet. They'll go to conference. So this could easily, in the conference between senators and representatives, they could say, well, we're going to take that amendment out and restore the funding to the Lottery Commission. But we know the Lottery Commission is facing a lot of criticism right now, so possibility of being sunset. So there's a chance that they don't have a budget because there's a chance they don't exist.
Well, appreciate the coverage. I know it was a lot to do, but we still have like 7 weeks left in the session.
We do. Next session, you can do the budget night, and I'll ask the questions.
Just make sure you get some rest, all right?
Okay.
Thanks, Dylan. Some Texas families are worried about proposed federal cuts to funds that help them buy food. Congress is considering slashing benefits like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. Texas Health and Human Services data shows nearly 3.6 million people rely on SNAP across the state. As investigator Arezow Doost explains, food pantries are scrambling to keep up with the growing demand already and now bracing for more impact.
We have a lamb shank.
Look at you. See, I knew you guys would find something.
Cherie Seeley's list is limited.
It's hard to read. Oh,
The breast cancer survivor from Liberty Hill says she can only eat certain things.
it's natural, organic, whatever, because of the cancer.
She says the few items she's able to take from Hill Country Community Ministries in Leander will help, especially after her SNAP benefits were cut earlier this year.
They took off $30 on my SNAP. You don't want to hear on camera what I say about that. It's wrong. It's dead wrong. If you're going to cut stuff, look at who you're cutting.
The food pantry is seeing a surge in families in need.
We are seeing already about an 11 to 12% increase year to date. Last year we served 140,000 people. So you figure about 10% increase or so. We're going to probably serve 150,000 people this next year, which is insane. I mean, out of this tiny food pantry.
What could potential SNAP cuts mean for Texas families?
For every meal our food banks are able to put on the table, SNAP puts 9 meals. So any cut, even a small cut, can really affect, can lead to people losing benefits, and then that leads to more strain on our resources.
Feeding Texas, the state association of food banks, says resources are already stretched. The nonprofit explained that recently the U.S. Department of Agriculture halted millions of dollars worth of deliveries to food banks. The anti-hunger organization shared data from the Texas Department of Agriculture that shows nearly 400 deliveries, including meat, eggs, dairy, and canned vegetables, were canceled statewide in March. They estimate these deliveries were equal to around 270 truckloads of food, valued at about $19.2 million. Feeding Texas says that makes it hard for the food banks in its network, like the Central Texas Food Bank, to meet the current demand, especially with higher food prices.
It's some of the most nutritious food that we can distribute. In some cases, food banks, that makes up about a quarter to a third of their inventory.
Can I do these two?
Yep. Seeley says even with SNAP benefits, she's barely getting by.
My income is $1,640 some cents for the month. Can you live on that? No. And then they want to cut the other stuff? No. So don't ask me to say what I think.
Arezow Doost for State of Texas.
A bill to repeal Texas's unconstitutional ban on homosexual conduct resurfaces this session at the Capitol. The lawmaker behind this push, and a look back at past sessions. For decades, Texas law has continued to contain a provision outlawing homosexual conduct, despite a U.S. Supreme Court 2003 ruling declaring that measure unconstitutional. State lawmakers have tried for years to get it removed from statute, but have so far been unsuccessful. This legislative session, there are at least 6 such bills, including HB 1738 by Representative Benton Jones, which had a hearing before the House Committee on Criminal Jurisprudence this week. Last legislative session, Jones, then a House freshman and the first black openly gay state lawmaker in Texas, filed a similar proposal. It passed unanimously out of this same committee, but then later stalled, never reaching the House floor for a vote. While that bill progressed further than its predecessors, without its passage, the law remains on the books, something he hopes to change this time around.
I was intentional about meeting with every one of the committee members, no matter where you stood on this legislation. I had an opportunity to hear some good things and I had to also hear some things that I wasn't as comfortable with. It wasn't my job to judge. It was my job to listen to my colleagues and be receptive to them just as I want them to be receptive to me. Chairman Smithing, your marriage to your wife is not a crime. Representative Little, your marriage to your wife is not a crime. Representative Money, your marriage to your wife is not a crime. So when we have a conversation regarding my fiance Gregory and I, why should I, a colleague of yours, be treated as a criminal under this statute?
Critics of the law say leaving it in limbo opens the possibility of its misuse by police who don't understand its legal status, and lawmakers crafting other policies that could impact the LGBTQ+ community. Still listed in the Texas Penal Code, it contains only a brief notation indicating it is unenforceable due to the Supreme Court's decision, but that decision did not force state lawmakers to remove the measure from their penal codes. This week's bill marks at least the 15th time in history Texas lawmakers have held a public hearing with witness testimony on such legislation, according to our own analysis. The most consistent group against the legislation has been the conservative activist organization Texas Values.
Is it the position of your organization that homosexuals should be viewed as criminals? Because that's the only reason to keep this statute on the books.
The position of our organization is that we don't want to pull something out that's going to make it seem like that homosexuality is more acceptable.
And what the law did was criminalize that conduct. And so the position then has to be that that's the viewpoint you want to continue in perpetuity, even in the light of a Supreme Court case invalidating this particular provision.
We want to give the message that this is not acceptable conduct.
But unacceptable conduct versus what is criminal conduct is different.
The committee will now consider what it heard in the hearing before a possible vote and sending it to the House floor and then on to the Senate.
There's a failure here, no question.
Strengthening the state's power to investigate alleged abuse against students. 2 Texas bills promising to keep schools safe. Texas senators are considering a bill that would increase the Texas Education Agency's power to investigate alleged abuse on school campuses. Multiple witnesses detailed their personal experiences with sexual misconduct on a school campus during a public meeting this week. Investigator Kelly Wiley has the details on the push to make students safer.
Okay, we're going to keep at this until we stamp this out.
In an emotional hearing at the Texas Capitol, lawmakers heard testimony on a string of bills dealing with sexual misconduct on school campuses, including a bill that would expand the number of school employees the Texas Education Agency can investigate for misconduct to include contractors and non-certified employees. Lawmakers filed the bill in response to a KXAN investigation that found a former juvenile corrections officer got a contracted tutoring job at Austin ISD after the Texas Juvenile Justice Department determined he had had an inappropriate relationship with the student.
There's a failure here, no question. And this person should have never been around young people ever again in their life. SB 571 is an attempt to close these loopholes in the Do Not Hire registry.
The investigation highlighted issues with information sharing between state agencies and facilities that care for minors, but also the limitations for who can be investigated by the TEA and be listed on the agency's Do Not Hire registry.
This bill appropriately covers more than 250,000 personnel in public schools who were not previously covered by our Do Not Hire registry. Imagine that's 250,000 coaches, bus drivers, custodians, cafeteria workers not previously covered are covered by this bill. So pass this great bill, close these loopholes, and fund TEA to do the investigations needed to keep these predators out of all schools.
Kelly Wiley, State of Texas.
Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton says he is challenging Senator John Cornyn for his Senate seat in next year's midterm elections. This sets up what will undoubtedly be a contentious and expensive GOP primary contest ahead of 2026. To give us some insight, we invited Jasper Scherer, the politics reporter with the Texas Tribune, to the show. Thank you for being here.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Well, let's dive right in. Cornyn is a longtime senator, has held the seat since 2002. Why is Paxton choosing to try and take the seat right now?
Well, I think it's kind of a reflection in some ways of where Republican politics are at in Texas and nationally, just in terms of, you know, the folks who are voting in and deciding these Republican primaries are much more in league with the kind of the Paxton wing of the party, looking at these low turnout contests where, especially in midterm, non-presidential elections like we'll have in 2026, where turnout is even lower. You know, it's the kind of the more engaged and farther right activists who are going to be turning out, and that's that's Ken Paxton's bread and butter. So it'll be up to John Cornyn to make the case for kind of his conservative, accolades, his accomplishments, and to convince enough folks and maybe expand the electorate a bit, get some folks out who are, from his base, kind of more of the establishment business-minded wing.
Yeah, you kind of alluded to it. These two politicians really represent the two sides of the Republican Party right now in Texas. What are these ideologies and where have we seen that split play out before?
Generally speaking, thinking back to kind of the Texas Republicans who were in power when John Cornyn, came into statewide prominence when he was elected Attorney General of Texas in 1998 when he first won his Senate seat in 2002. This was coming on the tail end of the George W. Bush governorship in Texas. It was an era of much more kind of Chamber of Commerce business Republicans who were running the show. Now in the era of Trump, it's the Paxton Paxton type politicians who are ascendant, and they are kind of seizing their moment. Going back to your first question, part of it is just it seems to be that Paxton kind of smells blood in the water, that he's been putting out some early polls showing that at least from what he sees, he's got an early advantage over Cornyn. So but definitely some distinct advantages, but also Cornyn will be presenting his own conservative record and, telling voters about all the Trump appointees that he has been confirming and all the conservative legislation he helped pass as the Senate GOP whip. So we'll see if that lands with enough primary voters.
All right, Jasper Scherer from the Texas Tribune, thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
We really don't know just how many people are impacted by this disease. It just doesn't get the attention it needs.
How a freshman Texas representative is bringing lawmakers together to track sickle cell disease, what the bill would do, and the impact it could have. A Texas freshman lawmaker is making a name for herself this legislative session, authoring a bill that has support from both Democrats and Republicans and is now closer to becoming law. The legislation would create a state registry for sickle cell. That's a rare, serious hereditary blood disorder that causes extreme pain and infections. Jayla Washington reports on why this is personal for the lawmaker and how it could help save lives.
It is hard not to smile when you see an infectious personality like this.
Sydney is tough as nails. She is one of the most mature, assertive little people you will ever meet.
Sydney is Houston Representative Lauren Ashley Simmons' daughter, and she has been through a lot.
My daughter has had more hospitalizations than some adults have.
She has sickle cell, a rare inherited blood disorder that's most commonly seen in Black people. It causes intense internal pain and infections that can be hard to treat.
We really don't know just how many people are impacted by this disease. It just doesn't get the attention it needs.
And that's what led Simmons here.
It is my honor to lay out my first bill before you today.
Bringing forward House Bill 107 that would create a sickle cell registry in Texas.
Cunningham.
Yes. Unanimously.
Johnson.
Yes. It passed the Public Health Committee this week and will now go before House members to vote on.
This is a way for us to ensure that this disease is being treated with the same care, with the same attention that any other life-threatening illness that impacts people.
People like her daughter Sydney, who has watched her mom advocate for her and so many others.
Her illness is a priority and important, not just for me as her mother, but this place, this building.
For State of Texas, I'm Jayla Washington.
Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.